teacher for decades.
Thank you.
And we want to give you a different kind of experience, something I've done, well, for years. After I left teaching, then I formed a charity called CS Interviews, Community School Interviews Society. And one of the aims of it is to help people understand how the world really works. And one of the aims of today is not for you to listen to me, actually, is for you to drive this whole experience. And it's about, it's going to feature Melissa, who seems to be the perfect person because many people know her. And Melissa is going to be interviewed by you, but not randomly. She's going to be interviewed around themes. Funny roller. Okay, so we're just going to take it a bit more. There. So in this process, we want you to ask some questions about what makes a good question. So what makes a good question? Anybody got it?
Well, open-ended, first of all.
Open-ended. Another thing is, if you think the answer is going to be yes or no, right? Like on the street, when you're asking somebody, people will give you a chance for 2 questions, basically, and then they're gone. Physically or mentally. So if you're going to ask a question, you think the answer is yes or no, why don't you assume? My suggestion is you assume the answer is yes or no, and then reframe the question. Right? So we assume the answer is yes, and then say, imagine because Melissa grew up in some kind of foster care. I think that's correct. So let's assume she was successful doing that. So then we could ask the question, what accounted for your success in foster care? So there's one thing. Imagine you have 1 or 2 questions in this time frame we've got. So if you're going to ask a question, another one is do not front load. Front load, in my definition, is everybody's story is so important, and I totally get it. But when you ask a question, just ask the question, right? Don't give any background about yourself. Don't talk about your experience. Don't talk about your own personal pain or journey. Just ask the question. People will take you way more seriously. They'll listen more intently when you do that. And another one is less is more. That means keep it short. How can you say your question in a brief way? And if Melissa, who has oodles of stories, and I really respect all that she does, you could ask her one question and she could take up the next 15 minutes like that with one answer. But if she's going to be taken to get more juice out of this, she's going to be succinct. She's going to follow the less is more principle. And the other one is if they say something and you say, you know what, I bet you there's more to that answer. So now we have some themes, and what we'd like to do is come up with at least one question. Imagine this thing. Taking risks on a personal basis. Melissa runs a home, her own home, and takes in some very challenging people. So what question could you ask her around taking risks on a personal basis? Any question? She's not going to answer right now, but what's the question that comes to mind?
Why?
So why do you take these risks? There's one. What's another question?
What is an example?
What is an example? Okay, you get it? That's good. Here's another thing that's really cool in this process, which is different than many lectures, which this isn't, is you get to ask your burning question. The other thing is, it's, the people who do this better, who do this best, when I do this in school, we've done it a lot in the schools, are the kids on an IEP, individual educational program. Those are the kids who are on some kind of spectrum, right? They're the ones who have no fear. They are putting their hands up all the time, and they're not asking stupid questions. They're asking really interesting questions because they've got a safe format. This is a wonderful thing. Thank you for being so alert so late in the day, on an academic day. Working with the system. So, Melissa is a registered social worker. She's able to do some stuff that is not normally done. What's the question you wonder about?
What is it like working for the system?
What is it like working for the system? What is it like working? That's a good point. That's a good question. Yes.
I would like to know what kind of constraints do you find most frustrating while you work?
Great.
How can you work around it?
You know what I like? There's some points to some of these things that are whoa, a little hotter than others, and that's totally cool. We did this one time, and one of the guys put on raw food. This guy had done some major work in creating biofuels and all that kind of stuff, but this school just went boom. They want to talk all about that, and that's totally cool. It doesn't matter that you have to. We're not saying that everybody has to just hit all of these. And then keeping up the spirit. How do you keep up the spirit? What do you wonder about?
What brings you joy?
What brings you joy in this? What a great question. That's a wonderful question. We did this at a bank one time, and one of the questions that the people had, they were trying to warm up their relationships with customers, is what makes you happy? It's way better. How you doing? That is the world's worst waste of breath. But what makes you happy? Whoa. Wow. Brings you joy? Yes. Try it out with a stranger. Take transit and ask that question at the back of the bus. And then email me. I'm interested.
Or the elevator.
Oh, the elevator. Absolutely. So here's a short example of that. So we were working with a geography class. And in this thing, we were training the students to do this approach. And we did it at Tuscany Mall, Tuscany Village. Not really a village, is it? Yeah. But we were doing it, and then we sent them out and said, talk to a stranger, come back and tell us. So this girl got into an elevator. You know how many floors there are in Tuscany Village? I think there's 2, maybe 3. And so she gets in the elevator early in the morning, and she said, how are you? Or no, how's it going? The guy said, nothing. And then she went shift all the time of the thing going up 3 floors. She said, what's gone well for you today? Boom! Wonderful stories of things that he's really been trying for, great change, got his glasses fixed, made that appointment, everything. And at the end of the ride, remember how many floors?
4.
Or 3. He said, thank you for asking. How many people do that? So in this process, we train, help, encourage people to ask great questions, and now you're going to get the great experience of trying this out with whatever question you come up with. Melissa's on, I'm back there.
What brings you joy?
What brings me joy?
Can you move forward?
Right here?
Perfect.
I think there's a lot of things that bring me joy, and probably the biggest thing that brings me joy is family, my kids, and an opportunity to wake up each day and do it again, and do it different, and do it better, or just to make the same shitty mistakes again, but to know that in making them again, I might not make them again the next time. So a redo.
And on that little slip of paper, what we'd love you to do is, if you come up with one idea, they thought, ooh, that was good, I'd like to use that. Or one insight that you heard, we'd love you to get us kind of feedback.
What drives you to take personal risks after what you've been through?
I have nothing to lose and everything to gain, because it's not about self, it's about the community. It's about the sense of connection, it's about the sense of belonging, and if I can create that, sorry, I'm a bit emotional. You're teaching about the blue heron, or the blue bird got me. Yeah, I have everything to gain, and I've experienced everything that you can lose. And I work with people who've experienced everything. They've lost everything. They're victims of human trafficking. They're homeless, they're addicted, they've lost everything. So I have also lost everything in my upbringing, because I was taken from my family at the age of 3, the 60 scoop, and being fair. As an Indigenous child, I was separated, because I thought, oh, she's pretty white looking, she's very Winnie Tum, we can maybe adopt her out. And so I grew up experiencing loss, grief, trauma, violence, abuse, yada, yada, yada. Been there, bought the ranch. And so what I have to gain is everything.
Upon reflection, what are the strengths and the unique qualities that you actually bring to your work in the world and your life, given that very difficult upbringing?
I don't give up. I'm stubborn. I've survived the foster care system. I have a memory that helps me remember, not just on a cognitive level, but an intuitive level, a sensory level, and that helps me to carve a path for others and for myself. I have a lot of capacity for joy and for love, for forgiveness, for moving forward instead of getting stuck.
Can you tell me something about the strengths you see in the women that you work with that really help them move forward?
Absolutely, they're amazing. They're my heroes. They are incredibly resilient. And they, too, are people who are willing to show up for another day and a redo. And maybe at some point they can start to hope for something different. But the fact that even if everything's been stripped from them, they're still willing to show up and be authentic and present and to try again is amazing to me.
When you're in overload, how do you prioritize what you're going to tackle?
Great question, because I tend not to be, as Catherine can attest to, having had her as a prof, I'm not overly analytical, so I don't have that prioritization. But I guess I triage. I have a nursing background, and so it's crisis response. If there's a bleed over oh, I have a headache, then I go with the bleed, and then I get to the headache using that as a metaphor. But it tends to be intuitive as well. It's not a cognitive analytical process for me. It's an intuitive response. But I triage, yeah, for sure.
It's right there.
Yeah.
Do you feel like your spirits are whole now?
My spirit?
Yes.
No.
That's what I picked up.
Yeah.
Next. Or, when they say something like that, you can go deeper. You can ask a follow-up if you dare. Or care.
I've got Kleenex, it's okay.
So why are your spirits not there?
Because, have you arrived? Sort of, yeah?
Sort of at my age.
And so, I don't think it's an age thing. I think it's a process, and it's about whether we're able to accept the growth and the change. How much support do we have? Do we get rest? Do we not get rest? Do we have finances to work with? There's so many variables in a picture that's about restoration. And so I don't think a person has ever arrived, really, but I think that there is a process when you come closer and more grounded to having your spirit centered, and I know that that time will come. Yeah.
Can we just stop for 1 second or a couple minutes? Can you put down one idea on your piece of paper that you noticed from this so far? One idea that's popped out.
This is kind of like the opposite of a stand-up comedy routine.
I think a couple of the best things to give to children that you come in contact with.
What are some of the best things to give to children that you come in contact with?
But it could be
Do you mean like tangible things or anything?
No.
Love, total acceptance and love. Uninhibited, unadulterated, unblemished. Just love them. Let them know that they're amazing the way they are. They don't need to be anything more than they currently are. They just need to be who they are, because that's enough. Yeah.
And the question you asked, the way you phrased it was just like that, because because you said one of the best, When you ask someone what is the best, then you would go into analysis paralysis, right? And you go, oh no. But you answered it with grace, and you allowed her to think about, was only one of many. Tell me one. It's good. I'm just throwing these out.
Could you tell us about 2 or 3 ways in which you take care of yourself?
Myself?
Yeah.
Well, clearly diet is one of them. No, I'm addicted to matcha lattes from Starbucks, so I'm really, self-care and matcha are very important to me. Being in nature, and you know, as she talked about being on the land, for me that's really important. I love cooking and feeding. You know, I try and work in all 4 quadrants of the medicine wheel: emotional, physical, mental, and spiritual. And so I have nieces that come over and we drum. I like to feed people and watch them eat. That makes me super happy. And I like baths. You know, I'm a female, right? Who doesn't like baths? And I wish I could say I like to exercise, but no, don't. It's just so boring, that whole treadmill thing. Right.
Last question. There's one right here.
What's next for you in this work that's meaningful for you?
What's next? Well, Creator is a creator of surprise. So, I've just formed my own non-for-profit, and I have a board of Indigenous women. It's called Wakata Kateri, which means, Wakata Kateri Resiliency Rising, and that means community wellness in Mohawk. And so it's the first Indigenous anti-trafficking. I used to work at BC's Office to Combat Trafficking in Persons, and I still do human trafficking work for the Indigenous communities. So I think the focus of my energy will be to develop that and to work to keep the youth of our province safe, because I've been doing that work for a lifetime, but now it's a little more formal, and so moving forward. But who knows? Who knows what's around the corner? Hard to say.
And how hard was it for you to come up with these questions? The quality of the questions was excellent. Because when we first started, it was pretty flat line, and then all of a sudden, this depth of question came up.
The process is very personal and allows for really authentic curiosity. So I can be curious about this person and get my curiosity addressed, and I'm involved right away.
But you have to be a bit careful so as not to put somebody on the spot and make them uncomfortable.
Oh, that. We went past that a long time.
It's right. And I asked the guy, I had a guy, he was a captain, a major in Desert Storm, and we took him into a classroom, and the students asked questions, and it was like some life and death situations, some dying and all that stuff. And I said, Mac, why did you share those stories? Because they were really, this guy was missing in action for 5 days. It was just crazy. And he said, I felt safe. So there's something happens, like when you share authentically, the person here seems to share authentically. And you're also deeply listened to by 30 people who are full of empathy. That's pretty moving.
There was also something about permission to ask the question.
Yeah.
It's like we wouldn't normally just go into it, and after 5 minutes, jumping into questions like that, but somehow you had created the space and there was an implied consent, at least.
Implied by standing.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, if there's any further, we have 2 minutes left. Yes?
I just was thinking about it from a teacher's perspective, and how I always want to set up this sort of very authentic I-thou, intimate space, like that sacred space with students, but we're so busy with so much to cram in. I have an intro to theory course, like it should be a whole program, but it's one course. But you know, I could take 30 minutes and say, ask me anything, like ask me anything, and that would communicate to every student in there that we can all do that with each other, and it would really break the ice. And I might actually learn more about myself, because they'll ask me some pretty bizarre questions, I'm quite sure. And I can always say no. Like I can always say no, that's private. I don't want to talk about
but
that.
the suggestion I would make is lay down what the themes are, because then you're sort of in control. The reason that guy, the major at Desert Storm felt okay, because he knew that it was contained.
Yeah.
And contained is cool. That's okay to do. And because if you open it wide up, they don't know where to start. You totally had a way of starting this.
I think there was a powerful moment, though, the moment where you said, assume the answer is yes, and then our friend here said, no, I don't think the answer is yes. So that to me was a really interesting moment. And because I can appreciate what you're saying, is you want to go deeper, and yet sometimes the answer isn't yes.
Right.
And so how do you balance those, you know, our humanity, where you know, although I wonder if we had assumed that the answer was yes, if you would have given a different side of the story. It's hard to say, but I thought that was a really powerful moment, and I'm glad that you stuck with your original question in spite of the prompting, because it was helpful. Yeah.
And what we find is that if we often do like 3 speakers in a row, and by the 3rd speaker, people are really warmed up. Like they really go for it. And we've had some great speakers, and the students just get this wonderful opportunity. They just think it's wonderful to turn the tables. Because nowhere in education are students really empowered to ask questions, really. In fact, those same students go to job interviews at the end of the interview if they have any questions. Some people don't have any questions, and those people don't go any farther at all. So, yes.
For a community course I was teaching, community health promotions, I had the students create their own questions before they and their objectives before they went into the community, and it was amazing how good they were.
Yeah.
So if you give them that freedom, it is pretty impressive what they come up with.
Yes.